Well, let's give her Z. Boldy, 7x7. What do we think?
Well, yeah. So like you just said, first of all, we'll talk Boldy. We'll dive into, I don't really know what order it's going to be in either.
You're just going to talk when I tell you to.
True. Okay. Good point. Love that. Anyways, so Matt Boldy, 7x7. Thank you. Love the deal. I think based on just this year, I think he's got 29 points in 40 something games, maybe. Realistically, that's actually not even let's say you just base it off this year. That's not even that bad. It's not I think based on what we were expecting versus what he's been putting out this year, it's obviously been super inconsistent, just like the whole team. You would say, oh, that's not like a $7 million year. That's not a $7 million contract year. But I think if you look at it and you say, well, we were expecting the bridge deal, and then really that's just punting this first big contract down the road, which is realistically, I feel like a lot of times too, when a guy's bridge, especially if they're going to light it up during the course of that bridge, then you're kind of in a real predicament when it comes time to, whatever, sign that big deal. First of all, they're 3 years older, 2 years older, whatever it is. It doesn't take that long either for a team to kind of turn into you look at Ottawa, when they went to the Eastern Conference Final, right? 1 year later, they were the worst team on the fucking planet. So even when you're all right, we'll just bridge a couple of years because we know that the league's going to look like this, we'll look like this. This is what our cap structure is going to look like. Realistically, it's hockey, so that doesn't work. So anytime I think you can, and I think a lot of teams are doing this now where it's yeah, if we have to bridge, we'll bridge. But realistically, with our young studs that we know we want here long term, if we can do it and we can lock them up early, let's just do it now. And ideally, a couple years into the contract, you're how the fuck is this kid making $7 million? You look at New Jersey with Jack Hughes.
That was the exact comparable I was going to bring up. People shit on that contract when they sign it. It's yeah, we're not signing him for what he did this year.
I also cannot believe anyone shit on the deal.
So many people did.
It's crazy to me though. The first overall pick, what the kid yeah. He was never not going to pan out to be a superstar in this fucking league. And he was playing on one of the worst hockey teams I've ever seen in my entire life. Even when they were trying to be good, it felt like every player in their top six, every player in their top four on D, and their starting goaltender, Mackenzie Blackwood, they were oh, they're all out for the season now. Everyone got hurt somehow and whatever. But Hughes, obviously when he started wasn't it was him versus Kakko that year. And everyone said Kakko is going to come in. He'll probably make a bigger impact initially the first year or two, but long-term Jack Hughes will outproduce. It's not close. And realistically, since day one, they both struggled to begin. Well, I'll put quotes around struggle. Because I don't really know what Jack Hughes is supposed to do on that New Jersey team. But, I mean, it took him, a year and a half to adjust to the fucking NHL as a center, as a dude that weighs 87 pounds soaking wet. And now the kid looks like he's going to put up 100 points every fucking year for God only knows how long. So you look at that and you say, all right, they did the smart thing. They locked him up early at a ridiculously low number for what he's going to be. And I think obviously you just kind of hope that it pans out similar to Boldy, where they're very different players, obviously, but kind of same impact on your team. If you can have him and Kaprizov be your 1-2 punch in terms of pure offense, and one guy's making 9.5, the other guy's making 7, sign me up. And, we've got a couple other guys that are locked up long-term that you really don't want and to go anywhere. And now you've got young guys that, have either aren't here yet, but project to be impact NHLers. But you want to build around Kaprizov. You want to build around Boldy. So the fact that they got this done, obviously it means that more change, or there's going to be more moves coming in terms of guys that will not be here probably as early as next year, maybe even this year. But locking in Boldy to 7x7 is brilliant. And I think that's something you do and kind of deal with, the cap when you need to. So big fan of the deal. Big fan of avoiding a bridge. And good for him. He's going to make fucking like 53, 54 million before he turns 28. And then he's going to lock himself in again for another big ticket. So he's going to make over $100 million in his career. And I love that as a Massachusetts guy. So good for him. How do you feel about the deal, Hoppy?
I mean, just like you said, it's good for both sides. And I think that's the thing that Guerin really emphasized in all of his press conferences. Like, it's a fair deal. Like, Boldy has a security. The team knows now they've got him locked in so that if he takes off the way that Guerin expects him to, very, very friendly deal for the team. But I think the bigger thing for us to look at here is the ramifications, because we agree, good decision, but there's a lot more decisions now coming because of it, because we got, 5 forwards, 2 defensemen, and a goalie still yet to sign in the offseason. I think we got just over $9 million to do it. Decisions will be made, some soon, some later, but I mean, what are your initial thoughts on who the casualties are, who the players are that we got to prioritize? Like, what happens there?
Well, I mean, I look at the 2 defensemen who are up in this year, and I kind of wonder what this means for them, right? Does that mean, before the season, I would have told you it would be shocking, realistically, if Matt Dumba was traded mid-season. First of all, even if he was playing really well, his value's not going to be super high. The fact that he's 28, his contract ends at the end of this year, he's making $6 million, has not been healthy for a full season, and I don't know how long, plays up and down, plays that style of game that's not exactly the defenseman that you add at the deadline. Usually those guys are like the big fucking like stay-at-home guys that we want for the playoffs, and that's just like not Dumba's kind of profile, right? Like, he's very much high risk, high reward. And I think this year it's been highlighted even more so. I feel bad whenever people just like shit all over him. Obviously, he's scratched tonight versus Carolina. But, even just aside from the player and the way he plays, like, he's such a big part of that fucking locker room that's a move mid-season that if you're really trying to do big things, like, you better fucking, first of all, nail the trade. Or it better be like, I mean, if you're going to do it now, it's probably, you're talking long-term. You're not really, I don't really think you get much either way or if you move with a deadline this year. But this makes me think, all right, we did a little bit of business that was kind of designated for the offseason by signing Boldy. Do you also like try to tackle this right now where you don't lose Dumba for like absolutely nothing? But we know Guerin said he's not interested in doing that. But is that the move you need to make? At that point, I worry about, first of all, however you feel about Dumba. Like, you're taking out a top 4D. Teams that are going for the cup don't trade their top 4 defenseman. They just don't. Mm-hmm. But I can't see a world where they do re-sign him unless they're like, he's like, yeah, I'll sign for a league min. Like, I don't know. I can't see a world where he's here after this year. So it makes me wonder about that, even though I think that's a very risky move. And it really does make me wonder about the future of Calen Addison. I think Bill Guerin loves Calen Addison. I think Addison's outstanding. I love Calen Addison, and I want him here forever. But what are you going to pay him?
I have opinions on that. But first on Matt Dumba, for me, this is the biggest pickle. And a lot of people think it's so simple. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, move him now, get something.
Don't lose him for
nothing. It is the opposite of that. I think that the more likely outcome is letting him walk for nothing, because his value is not high enough that you prioritize getting probably a middle-ish pick. Like, are we looking best case scenario, a third? Like, if we get super lucky and someone's desperate, a second, versus the impact he has on the roster throughout the rest of this year. You trade out players like that. There's other guys that are going to be on the move too. Like, Greenway's a guy that we got to talk about. You take these guys that are like big figures in the room, regardless of what they do on the ice. That's not something that you do to a team going into contention. And if Bill Guerin's actually trying to win in the playoffs, that's not happening. Like it's weird that I feel like even though he has no value perceived, right? They're more likely to trade him if they become sellers because, okay, we're not worried about what happens come playoff time. But he's a guy that you're not getting rid of unless it's the right deal. And I don't think the right deal is going to be there if I'm just being blunt about it.
Yeah, exactly. And like word for word, Guerin pretty much was like, we're not just moving him to move him to get, it's not a cap dump. We're not doing a cap dump. We're not doing that.
Right.
And
which they really don't need to do a cap dump because this year with the money that they're storing up, like they're going to have,
if they're real about winning, if they're saying
year.
That they're winners, if they're going for a cup, you're not doing that. Right. Like, because I mean, what does that tell the locker room?
They don't even need to, right? It's not a cap thing. It's more, do I need to recoup something versus losing him for nothing? But it's like, no, getting rid of him for something, then you have to evaluate, is what you're getting back more valuable than him being here for the playoff run?
Right. Yep. 100%.
And people don't get that.
Right. Because I mean, like, yes, you signed Matt Boldy to the 7x7. That 7 doesn't kick in until next summer. You still have, as of right now, I think it's like $16.5 million in deadline space. So realistically, the bigger question is like, all right, what do you do at the deadline? Who do you go get? But I still am wondering now.
Addison.
I'm not letting you duck this question. We have to wonder about Addison here. Because first of all, I think he's a very big part of the future on that back end. We talk about how deep that prospect pool is, but there's no one that does what Addison does, right? I love Ryan Healy. First of all, he's probably 4 or 5 years away from the NHL. You go down there, Carson Lambos. I don't know. I've realistically said his absolute ceiling is being on a top pair, but I don't think I love the kid. I think he's going to be an NHL player. I think he absolutely could. If he's on a top pair, he's not driving that pair, right? Like he's not. If he's your number one, you're probably in trouble. Yep. You'll be fine. You might be fine. Well, there you go. You're the Minnesota Wild. You're in the murky middle, right?
Yeah, no shit, dude.
But I mean, you got Faber, so there you go.
Faber's legitimately the only guy that I see having somewhat of a fast track to the NHL.
Yeah.
Now, 100%. That doesn't mean that he won't teeter. Like he'll probably come up right away this year because he's coming off of whatever kind of run they go on in college. Inject him into the lineup in the bottom pair, but then next year, like he could very easily be back in Iowa, and that's okay. But he's a guy that I think within a year is probably up with the big group. Everyone else is several years out, and for me, like you said, no one brings what Addison brings, and it's kind of a weird predicament here where like. They kind of need each other because Kalen Addison, there's a lot of teams in the NHL where he's not going to go and be that power play quarterback. He's in a very, very fortuitous spot. He is, man, there's definitely a lot for him to figure out and learn on the defensive end, but he's shown you everything he needs to show offensively. This guy should be the power play quarterback for a long time. I think when you look at him and Gustafsson, both of which I think do need to be signed, if you can get the two of them done for between 4 and 4.5, I don't care how you shuffle that money, both of them on 2-year deals, because again, you're punting the problem, but we're going to have almost 15 mil come off the books in 2 years. That's just empty money. If you can sell them both on that, and at that point, hey, you're either going to go make bank somewhere else, or you've proven enough to us and we've got the money, we'll pay you. I think there's room there. Like, I can't see Addison demanding like 3 mil. I think you can get him for 2.5 for a 2-year deal. Him knowing, hey, I get to play power play time for the next 2 years with these guys. I'm either setting myself up for a big ticket elsewhere, or I'm going to be solidifying my spot here. Gustafsson's a little bit dicier, but I still think with goalies, like he hasn't really had a great go of it. He's found somewhere that he's comfortable. He's playing well, and he's in a good position where he's 1A, 1B with Fleury. Then, as soon as Fleury's done, he's going to be able to go 1A, 1B with a guy like Wallstedt. Like, I think he's in a pretty strong spot, too. And again, the proof's in the pudding. Play well these next 2 years. There will be money to be had.
Right. Yep.
So, I don't know. That's my view. And if Addison demands more than 2.5 on a 2-year bridge deal, then Guerin will probably tell him to fuck off. But I see that being a pretty reasonable deal for both sides.
Yeah. So like,
tell me why I'm wrong.
No. I don't necessarily disagree at all. So now it just kind of makes you wonder, all right, well then who? So you look at guys like Duhaime and Shaw and Dewar.
They're all questionable.
And no matter how we feel about it,
I think.
What? Yeah, so that makes you think, all right, like you could probably get more for him. Right? And like whether people like to hear it or not, like all three of those guys, those aren't like irreplaceable parts of your team. And I don't want to lose. I love all three of them. Like,
but what's my question? I guess
if you're gonna realistically if you're gonna realistically like analyze your hockey team,
right? All very replaceable. But I'd also argue
literally three guys on fourth line.
All three of them can replace Greenway, potentially. To the same level?
Yeah.
No, but at half the price of what he is with some of the issues he's been dealing with lately. And he's a guy just with his size, with the way he can skate. There are teams that are going to look at him. You could get an okay return for him, even with what's going on. Like, does he become your most movable asset?
Yeah, it's true. I worry about what it does to the rest of the line because that line as a whole,
right?
Like, again, like even when Kaprizov's putting up fuck you points, when Zuccarello's doing his thing, Globetrotter mode, like realistically, when they're all three of those guys are healthy together, that's your most effective line. So,
yeah.
Yeah, no, it's just, I mean, hey, it's a predicament, but at the same time, you just locked up Matt Boldy for 7 years. So 7.5, realistically. So, we already are 21 minutes in, but
let's wrap this in a minute. Who do you think is most likely to
best part of that, by the way. So after 22 minutes, we've decided it's good. The Boldy contract is good. That's what we've landed on.
Form, yeah.
Yeah. So now we can actually, I guess, move on and talk about some prospect stuff, which is usually, I think, why people come here. I mean, again, so you tell me, where should we start?
It's important though for us to give proper
Boldy's young.
Of Judd'z Budz. He is a Judd'z Budz graduate. I think he was the first guy that like moved up to the Wild roster that you had talked about on this show. So
it's true.
He's one of our guys.